the woos. So our next speaker is Dave Chronister. He's the founder and managing partner, CEO now too, right? CEO? Sure, yeah. So, of Parameter Security. We've been doing this since 2006. I've been along for the ride for the last 5, so it's been a good time. Dave's got about every Microsoft certification that's ever been had, and a bunch of the hacking ones that have been had as well, and all the information security ones as well. He's been on the news a lot of times, a lot of TV shows, and he's been just all over the world teaching. So, without further ado, Dave Chronister.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan, I think. We tell everyone to give a bio, and I have a bio, and every time I've had that employee and previous employees just go, I'm going to wing it. And it always turns out to them thinking, this is the ass that doesn't give me the raise on time, that yells at me. What can I say nice about him? He has certifications, he travels while I'm in the office, and then he's on the news. And that's it. So, thank you for coming, and thank you for sitting in on my talk. I took a couple years off on speaking, and I kind of hit a point where I've been doing technology for so many years. 1980, I got my first computer. TI-99-4A, anybody? Yeah. BBSers? Look at that. A momentary lapse of reason, BBSers? I know there's at least one former sysop. This is mine. I got kind of tired of, it just seemed like year after year after year, it was let's talk about the nifty little hacking stuff. And then leave ShowMeCon and come in, and we would then be overwhelmed with incident responses on our DFIR side. And it was never technology. It was crappy security programs and policy. And one of the weird things I started noticing, people that didn't know me very well, I'd start talking about policy, and I actually heard some young kids one time, I say young kids, they were in their 20s, say when they thought I was hard of hearing, he's a policy guy, he's not a technology guy. And I'm like, excuse me? And I realized that this is we're at this weird point where people still hate policy. And when I started the company 12 years ago, I could have told you that technology would save you. Technology is not going to do anything for you without a good plan. So what I wanted to do is spend the next hour and really talk about policy. And it's something everyone hates. Trust me, I'm an auditor. I cried the first time I realized I was an auditor. And it was disturbing. I'm like, oh crap, I hate what I've become. I was Anakin Skywalker, But it's extremely important. So, without further ado, I did mention in the opening that we have one esteemed Black Badge member that wasn't allowed to come to the United States. If anybody's been here before, you've seen the tall Viking Arnar around here from Iceland. And he's always excited about coming, and his visa expired. And so on Friday, he Snapchatted me, he goes, I'm going to see if DHS will get me here over the weekend. I'm like, it's a government facility, they're not working on weekend. And by Monday, he goes, listen, I can't make it, so I'm going to go to Berlin to drink my blues away. And then yesterday, he sent me this. So we now have ShowMeCon/ArnarCon in Berlin. And made my own con, get in line to sue me for stealing copyright stuff. So this is going to be entered into evidence on the record that he did say he stole stuff. So we're already going international. When you describe policy, everybody uses the same metaphors, right? You need the blueprints to build your house, which is true. An organization, but I kind of wanted to take a little different approach. I wanted to really talk about a time where we actually saw this play out in a whole different arena. Happened 75 years ago, World War II. I'm a huge history fan. If I ever get out of IT, I'm going to become a history professor. Except I'm not going to teach any classes. One of the questions that always comes up is whose military was superior, the Axis or the Allies? And at this, we're talking just a 100% military standpoint. And it's real easy to go, well, obviously it was the Allies because they won. Really? Who was the better hockey team past week? Who won Game 6? Were they better? Were they better? Because the Bruins better because they won? It's not a simple question as is who was necessarily better, but why did we win the war? So what part of the armies was more superior? If we take just a glance at the military, let's look at technical power. I'm finishing a book right now called Operation Paperclip. It's about Operation Paperclip, where we brought scientists over. There's a reason why we brought 1,000 scientists over, including a lot that were part of the concentration camps and human experiments, because the Nazis were kicking our butt in technology. In every single aspect of technical power, the Axis was winning. Tiger tanks, those things, as long as they were started, because they took 2 hours to warm up, they would shoot a hole through a Sherman tank in no time. Every Panzer was superior to its counterpart in tanks. Air power. The Messerschmitt 232. Does anybody notice anything strange about the Messerschmitt? It's a jet. And the Mustang is not a jet. Guess what the Mustang couldn't do? Catch the Messerschmitts. Upper left-hand corner, anybody know what that is? V2 rocket. There's a V1 rocket as well. Who broke the sound barrier? It's because it's up there, Mike, right? Everybody wants to say Chuck Yeager. The V2 rocket broke the sound barrier. In 1944, it was going Mach 5, 3,500 miles an hour. It didn't necessarily blow stuff up. The sonic implosion or impact would disintegrate, vaporize anything around it. The Axis and the Japanese were about the same. At the time, during World War II, it was estimated by the Allies that Germany's technology was about 30 to 35 years ahead of the Allies. Well, we're all speaking English. Some of us speak German. Why is that? Why did they lose? Well, it's not the technology necessarily. Let's look at how their chain of command was. Let's look at how their operations were set up. The Allies had all of their, and by the way, I realize I'm seeing a lot of gray hair in here, and I have big old clocks I can't even read, so I will give my slides out to anybody that wants them. They had a chain of command where all of the countries had chief of staff that was representative of the entire company, or the entire military branches, and then there was a clear and concise aspect to the way that they did their operations and their chain of command. Now, if you look at the Axis, especially Germany's, it kind of looks the same. Devil's in the details. Upper left was the Fuhrer, right? Adolf Hitler. Upper right. If you notice, it looks like that there are people that have direct commands and he just has a few. But there's 4 main groups. The Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the SS. The SS had the Tiger tanks. The Army didn't. And then in almost every other case where he had delegated, he was able to override them. So what we end up happening is what looks like it's organized ends up where the reason the Axis lost, especially Germany, was their plans, their command structure was screwed up. It all relied on Hitler, and it all became backstabbing. When we start to look at D-Day, for example, if you actually look at D-Day, it was a failure. We did not achieve any of our goals at all. We did not. We only took 2 of the 5 beaches within the time frame. People were scattered everywhere. It was a disaster. Why were we not repelled? Well, Rommel, everybody knows Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. He wanted the Panzers on Normandy. They've been planning for 3 years for this invasion. They had the seawall. And Hitler goes, no, those are going to stay in Paris. And Rommel couldn't do anything. The other problem is the day of the attack, Rommel went back home for his wife's birthday. Don't ever leave a conference or anything early to go to your spouse's birthday. He had to kill himself. So, that one change, had Hitler listened to Rommel, his expert, the best tank commander in World War II, D-Day would have never have happened. It would have been they would have completely repelled it. Technology didn't matter in this case. It was how you ran your organization and make sure it ran effectively and efficiently. Now, let's take this to your environment. When we talk about the goals of your security program, when we talk about the goals of your policy, who dictates those? Who is writing those in your organization? Are you? The security department? Is it some person that doesn't even deal with that area? Do they even align with your company goals? What drives your InfoSec program? Technology? My favorite question to ask organizations when I go in and do a policy audit is, tell me about your patching policy. We use System Center. We use WSUS. No, that's technology. That's not policy. You using WSUS for your Linux boxes, for your switches, for your printers? A lot of organizations will buy technology and then wrap their policy around that. Regulation? Oh, or PCI. Okay, that's good, but what else? You know, my organization I own has to deal with HIPAA, GLBA, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, GRDP, anything that our customers or clients may hold. But I have other concerns. I want to make sure that my system doesn't get breached because I don't want to go out of business. I don't want to have that uncomfortable phone call. I want to make sure our operations work. There's more to it than just external compliance. What dictates your requirements? Who actually determines? Well, we're going to keep 1 year of logs. System administrator? Right? Well then, if your Linux administrator sent it to syslogs, what are you doing with your desktop logs? Are you actually doing anything with those? Who's determining those? You start to see what's going on here. We're in a Germany problem. Is your security program implemented uniformly? I can tell you, probably most people here, the best they can say is, I think so. Most people are going to say, I don't know. Because after I became an auditor, I used to be in the banking world, and I had 6 banks, which meant I had 8 audits a year by Federal Reserve and Missouri. After I embraced the fact I was an auditor, I realized this means I can make people uncomfortable. And so I ask questions like that because that's my job, and I get to, and I do like to watch you squirm. So, but we help you afterwards, right? Someone has to ask those questions. So we run into this problem. What I see a lot of times that happen in organizations is someone will determine the goals of the InfoSec person. It's usually the wrong group. It may be a business analyst that's doing PCI. Says, well, our company is going to do this. Right? Then they come in and they say, here we go. They come in and they grab some technology. And then they build a security program or security policies around this. So again, well, we're using VMware. We're using System Center. We're using whatever. A great partner of ours out there, Carbon Black. We're using Carbon Black for our incident response, and we're going to build it along that. Okay, well, that sounds like a great idea. It's a great product. But the problem is it's only implemented where you can implement Carbon Black, right? So you're not able to deal with some of your devices, your IoT devices, your printers, different things like that. Your backup solutions may only be dealing with Windows. Then the other group comes in. They put their own technology in. And what ends up happening is you end up with an ad hoc network of security. And you end up with gaps in your security you don't even know about. Almost every incident response, and I'm not going to talk too many about a lot. Vaden, our DFIR guy, is going to be doing a lot of Tales from Trenches later, is a policy issue. Oh crap, we didn't think about that. Oh, we're backing everything up. It's good. Okay. Well, your backups just got encrypted. Or hey, the guy who set it up, the guy that set up the encryption set it password or key encryption, and where's your key? On the backup server. You're storing your backup key on the encrypted drive. We didn't think this through. So, this is a problem most organizations have. So let's actually just break down what we really need to be doing. So first and foremost, we need to talk about our security program. Now, this could be any program in your environment, but we're at a security conference, so we're going to talk about a security conference. So you go in, and if I went into every organization and said, show me your policies, I'm going to see 15 times the amount of people in here, because everybody has different styles of policy, even within their own organization. So when we start to look at a security program and our documentation, it is simple. All your security program is to ensure that the goals of the business are considered and applied throughout all aspects of business. That's it. It's how we do business. That's all we're doing. Anybody here have a cookbook? I cook like crazy. I've lost like 50 pounds. I don't know if anybody knows, but I lost like 50 pounds doing keto. I'm a diabetic, so I started doing that. And if you get on my Instagram, I'm just cooking all the time. I follow a recipe. And the people put the recipes out because they go, if you want it to taste like this, if you want to meet this goal, you follow these instructions. That's all we're doing here. I go in and it's like, thou shalt not. They shall have a microcomputer system. And you're like, who's talking about this? Moses? You know, it gets really disturbing. All we are doing in a program is defining how we do what we do in the business and ensuring that it is followed by everyone and it is known and crystal clear by everyone. That's it. You do not have to add anything else to your program. Okay? So, if we're talking about this, first and foremost, our goals are determined by strategic planning, which we're going to get in later. But essentially, this is long-term planning on how the business will function. You hear me say how the business will function and not how IT will function, how the security group will function. The biggest issue I have with IT, and I'm guilty of it, is we are a group of the tail wagging the dog. Who decides the business goals? Who determines the business needs? The business. Everybody say it with me. The business. This is a good thing. This is a very good thing. Because if, let's say, someone didn't do their due diligence and due care, what group didn't do it? The business. Who is not to blame? You. IT. Yeah, IT. Well, granted, we're all going to get blamed anyway. But really what it comes down to, we're support staff, we're custodians of data. Our job, the only reason we are employed is to make the business run more effective and more efficient. And I've seen way too many times where the business and IT are fighting. Business goals are not being able to be met. Because IT's going, well, we're not doing that, it's not secure. It's not your job to determine what's secure. Sorry. You're here to follow orders. You want to determine that? Go start a company. And never sleep again. This is my 6th death wish coffee. I'm up here shaking and my heart's about ready to explode. We implement those goals. We implement what was dictated to us. Okay? Now, our strategic planning is long-term. Okay? Set by the data owner. Anybody here take CISSP with me? Anybody? Okay. You've heard this before. Go take a nap. By the way, we don't do CISSP anymore, but is Johnson in here? Kevin? Well, there's 2 Kevin Johnsons here. Secure Ideas Kevin. He's playing with his Wookiee upstairs. Awesome CISSP class now. Yeah, phrasing, sorry. Long-term planning. Let's go back to the war. What was the ultimate goal of the Allies? We wanted to defeat Germany, most importantly, get Hitler out, get the SS out. Contrary to what everybody believes, not everybody was a Nazi. In fact, if you go back to the hierarchy, the one person that was in charge that wasn't a Nazi was the Navy. And that was because Hitler hated the Navy. And Goebbels hated the Navy. Everybody hated the Navy. Well, guess who became chancellor when they were defeated? The head of the Navy. He was the only one alive. And he was also, he didn't hang because he wasn't a Nazi. I just got off on Nazis here. But we wanted to get rid of the Nazis. We didn't say, well, we're going to do D-Day. We're going to build the nuclear bomb. The ultimate goal was, at the end of the day, from day one to the end, defeat Hitler, defeat the SS, bring Germany back under control. This is going to be set by the business unit, not you. Okay? This is long-term planning, high level. We keep this generic. And I'm going to give you some examples of these, but these are not going to be specifics necessarily. That's more in the details. Now, not only are they going to start and dictate what should be done, but your executive committee should also be ensuring funding, ensuring compliance, and they're the ones responsible for due care. Now, you're not going to have your board members sitting there writing down, dictating what your strategic plans are. But this is all they care about. Standards and procedures, they don't care about that. They don't need to. That's below, right? Eisenhower didn't care how a tank platoon worked. He just needed to know they did their job. When we look at this, I'm going to top-down approach, but almost think of this as a bottom-up approach, a pyramid, right? At the base foundation is our strategic planning. Our next is our tactical planning. Now, this is where you get involved as in IT, as in subject matter experts. This is where we actually say, okay, someone dictated that we secure data. We're going to encrypt it using this software. We're going to use SSL. We're going to set up a PKI server. It's going to look like this. Okay? Now, again, this is technology or solution specific. Because of that, it changes somewhat frequently, right? Hopefully no one's still on Windows XP. Windows 7 we won't talk about, right? And those of us on Windows 10 are dealing with 0 days, so we're all screwed. Except for the Ubuntu or Linux people going, no, we're not. It changes. But what you have to understand is the reason that we're looking at this from a different standpoint is because it is supporting the overall goal. So again, this is Eisenhower, who was the Allied commander, but he wasn't at the top. He was the second structure down. He's the one that pushed for D-Day. A long, mid-range program to help push or to further the overall strategic goal. Make sense? Now these are still, we're talking in your group, this may be the Windows group that does this, right? For a lot of different issues. You should have security involved in there. You should maybe have development involved in there. This is where you determine, this is how we're going to look at the end of the day. How are we going to meet compliance of the strategic planning? It looks like this. Simple. No more, no less. Okay? And then finally, operational planning. These are specific plans with milestone, dates, and accountability. Day-to-day goals. Okay, so where was every soldier supposed to be on D-Day? That was operational planning. They had milestones. They had targets. They knew if they missed them or not. Again, that's one thing I didn't bring about the Allies. They knew they didn't miss their targets. Hitler still thought he was waiting for the invasion from Calais. Say it correctly? Yeah, there you go. So, they're able to look at that. This is done by your subject matter experts. This is short projects. And when I say short projects, this may be building that server. That's your project. Creating that user. Implementing that security. Okay? This is how our program should look. Now, when we start looking at our documentation, all we are doing is documenting those plans. That's it. That strategic planning, those are your policies. The tactical planning, those are your standards and your baselines. And your day-to-day procedures and checklists are your operational. Now, okay, Dave, you haven't told me anything I don't know. Well, there's nuances. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I go in and someone gives me a policy. And their policy, their standard, and their procedures are all in the same document. Right? And the first question I go is, who approved this? You have to create your standards off of approved policies, right? And then you create your procedures to meet your standards. Yet they all magically came together all at once. You didn't have approved policies. Your standards, most people don't have standards. They have procedures, which just blows my mind. They know how to build the house, but they don't know what the house looks like. Right? It seems like nuanced details, but really, when you start looking at a healthy compliance and policy program, nuance matters. Because what you're going to find is when you start looking at information, you're only looking at some information. You're going to miss something. One of the other things that we have is called least Least privilege, right? So, if someone's going to be doing your procedures, does everybody have access to everything? That's a security issue, right? If everybody knows how, let's say, security operations look, how oversight works, because you have it all in one, they can figure out how to defeat it. We want to keep these things separated. Now let's talk about what these look like. Your policies. Policies are so easy. They have 4 things. 4 things and 4 things only. Number 1, why is it being established? 2, what does this cover? And 3, who's responsible for this? And 4, who provides oversight and what happens if someone doesn't follow it? That's it. What you don't see up there, we're going to put our solution in. We're going to actually put in our procedures in there. This is all your business unit cares about. That's all they should care about. We don't want an access problem where they're sitting there going, well, why are you using this technology? And you're sitting there going, you don't even know what this technology is. Right? You also don't want every update of Windows 10 to go in and get your policies reapproved. Which technically you should be doing because your baseline is changing every patch. These don't change. They are simple, but they are dictated by the business unit. First and foremost, you cannot outsource the responsibility of any of your data. That's a big deal now, right? Well, we just outsource it to someone. Okay. Are you sure they're doing the right thing? Show me your vendor due diligence. We're big on outsourcing. I get it. It's cheaper. But you still need to have directives for your vendors. And now you also have vendor due diligence you have to deal with. You can't just say, well, they're done. If they get breached, guess whose problem it is? Yours. You need to make sure a function is responsible for control. I was talking to someone earlier today, and they're like, yeah, our IR program, we had people listed in there that weren't even with the company anymore. Why are people in there? It may be your CIO. It may be your CISO. It may be done, your security group. It's a function. It's a group. It's never a specific person's name. You're going to run into problems. Whenever you have turnover, you have to get your policies reapproved because you have to change them. Everybody understands this aspect, right? Everybody here gets their policies reapproved by the business unit every time you make a change, correct? Yeah, we do. By the way, I'm not immune to this. We're QSAs. Is anybody here from the PCI Council? They're evil. I have to get audited by PCI. And I get audited by someone, when you say public network, they go, what's that? And I go, or the whole thing of, well, we keep everything in all of our data locked and on USB. Well, how do you deal with cloud solutions? Did you just not hear me? 12-month audit. So I understand, but I a lot of times go, it's changed. Was it reviewed by your board? Yes, it was on the board. So I can do that. Oversight. You need to make sure you have an independent organization making sure that it is being followed, that it's being followed via the wishes of the board, and that we can do any sort of measurement of success or not. It should never be 2 pages. In fact, I'm always surprised when someone has a 2-page policy. You should never have a 2-page policy, let alone a 10, a 12. And I'm talking about a wireless policy. I'm talking about a patching policy. I'm talking about a data security policy. These are generic. We use generic terms. All it is basically, we as the board see a need for this. We want to establish this. This function is responsible for it. This group is responsible for oversight, and it is a requirement of employment with our organization. Punishment includes and up to death and torture. Right? You're done? Yeah. Don't you wish? God, there'd be at least 5 less attendees here if I could do that. All right. Sorry, Dan. Standards. This is where you come in, okay? Now, you have a data security program. They basically say, listen, we understand that we have needs, regulatory, we have other needs of identifying, classifying data, and that we need to hold it at its proper security level. That's your policy. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means different things for different groups, right? So this is where we start talking about the technologies. This is how we deal with disk encryption. This is how we deal with, email encryption. This is how we deal with data classification. These are all standards. Now again, we're a level down here, right? We're in tactical now. We need to make sure our solution meets the requirements set by the policy. Are these being approved by the board? By the business unit? No. They have oversight to make sure that this is meeting policy. They support the one above them every time. But this takes out a level of that bureaucracy in there. The other reason that we need to start looking at it from this standpoint of it being separate is because information security comes in many different forms. We have multiple technology in the same environment. Trying to cover every piece of technology in the entire environment with one paragraph, you're going to miss something, or it's not going to be specific. Okay, so it allows us to have multiple standards underneath. Okay, this may be product related. We will set baselines. This has to be implemented through the organization. Okay? We require that everybody's running Windows 10, whatever the last 2 patches were, right? It's a requirement, okay? And this is how we ensure we are meeting the policies. Finally, our procedures. Essentially, all our procedures are step-by-step tasks to meet those standards. That's all we're doing here. Okay? Now, some of the biggest mistakes that I see. Number one, it should be step-by-step. I'll talk about this later. I've heard people say, you need to write good procedure where anybody can sit down. Really? And do it? So your president of your company can sit down and build start handing out certificates? If your PKI administrator is not available? No. I don't even do that. What you're dealing with there is it's people with the right skill set. Anybody should be able to sit down and look at and be able to replicate what your standard is. Okay? It is created by the people that created the standards and the people using the policy for the most part. The procedure. If you're the Windows administration team, you should be the ones creating the procedure to implement security. This brings up a whole nother discussion of what is your security group there for. Some people do it, their oversight. Other people say they implement the security. Who's responsible for security? Everyone. That second point doesn't make any sense. It kind of, you're not baking it into your everyday processes. Okay? All this is doing is this is ensuring that your standards are met. Screenshots are great. Screenshots are awesome. Picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Screenshot. Do it. You should be able to get a noob come in and be able to follow those policies. Now, I had a guy I worked with at the bank, and I was up in Troy, Missouri, which, is anybody here from Troy, Missouri? Okay, sorry. That's a crazy place. First time I ever met my boss, he was carrying 2 shotguns across the bank, and it got crazier from there. They were a client of ours, and every one of my employees that went up there went, "Holy crap, this is what you dealt with." I'm like, "Yes, I told you. They threw nitroglycerin in the elevator shaft. It's insane." I had this guy. I had a small office, and it looked into the data room. And of course, because it's a data center, we had all of our printers in there, we had people in there, and it was at 80 degrees because someone always got cold. It worked out great. But the operations manager, every day, he would go over to the bookshelf, pull his procedure out, set it down, open it up, and start following it. I actually would watch his finger go like that every time. Every single time. That annoyed me to death. I'm like, dude, you've been working here 20 years. You should know how to do your job every day. Now I'm an auditor. I go, okay, that's kind of cool. But for the rest of you that are not doing that, I really recommend checklist. When I started there, I set the standard for the desktops, for example. Or we'll take parameter. We've set up a methodology for doing a pen test, right? And it's long, and we've documented it. Do you think my pen testers open that procedure every single time? No, they don't. They know it. They do it every day. But we need to make sure something's not missed. So we use a checklist. Okay? Now, what's really nice about the procedures, maybe they get into something they haven't done in a while. They can pull that procedure out and look at it. But they're not going to look at every one of them. The other nice thing about checklists is they can become audit trails. So in our project software, every project, every procedure, there's a checklist. And they sign off that they did it. So if something comes up, we know what happened. Okay? Checklists are amazing. Checklists are awesome. They get a bad rap. Man, I was up here right before I did the introduction doing a checklist of things to do. I'm the smartest person in my mind. And I forget stuff. That was a joke. Sorry. People are like, my God, this dude, he is just... Why do you have a security program? Well, stupid boss made sure we got credit card readers. Now we're PCI. We have to deal with people's stupid health care. My brother works for a large company in town. And don't tell him I said this if you guys know him. Every family gathering, he's like, you know what my security department's making me do now? And I'm like, Mike, yeah, they are, because they kick ass. And you're bringing me joy in two ways. As a little brother, seeing my brother upset is happy. As a security professional, happy. This is nothing, okay? What people do is they'll take HIPAA, they'll take PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley. They'll use it as the exclusive purpose of their security program. You don't do that. Now, you can drive security. I found that out at the bank. GLBA, my boss, he was, 80-something years old, right? Talk like this. And, everything was, God damn it, heads are going to roll. That's what he did. And I actually found the way to get stuff around him was GLBA. Well, GLBA says this. Oh, then I'm going to talk to them and, he just sat in his chair like this, and it was disturbing. Best advice I can give you is if you have someone like this, my boss was incredible. He was an incredible man. I have to give him credit. He couldn't tell you what year it was. One time we had an argument about being 1984. But he looked at my Dell bill one time and just looked at it and went, "They charged shipping wrong." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And yeah, they did. I explained to him, I go, "Okay, Donald, you can have secure, you can have usable." I go, "You're the boss." He's, "Goddamn right, I'm the boss." I said, "The more usable you are, the less secure. The more secure you are, the less usable." Figures to explain, great. Kind of looked at it, looked up at me, down at it, looked up at me, and he goes, "I want to be right there." I go, "Okay." I circled it. I said, "Okay, sign this." And so he would forget. But if he signed something, it was worth gold. I had my golden ticket. So anytime I needed something, I would go, he'd go, "God, I can't pay for this." I'd go, "But you're right here." And that's what that means. Okay. And so we would pay for it. Where I'm getting at with this is your security compliance, your external compliance is just another factor of how you do business. Your hospital, HIPAA is a factor. It's not the only factor, right? Your retail, credit cards are a factor. It's not your only factor. This comes into the strategic planning. And when you start to do your tactical, there may be some technology specifics that you have to address. Now, as we're going to see, I'm going to start to put this into play. As we see, this can get out of control really quick. Did we think of this? 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 This is where frameworks come into play. What framework's the best? The one that you actually use. All right? Now, a framework is just that, a framework. It does not build your security program for you. It helps you look at the different aspects of it. Okay? Don't be that person. Well, you know, I've had this actually happen. Can you show me your security program? And they gave me ISO 2701. And I go, guys, let's go have a drink. It's 10 a.m. You're going to need one. They do help, though. They help you be consistent. They help you think of everything. You know, Matt, towards the end there, someone asked a question about what happens if you're blue, you don't have enough for red. And he kind of, you know, one of the things we were kind of talking about there was operational blindness, right? And what that is when you're dealing with things every single day, you miss stuff because it's out of mind. That's why companies like mine exist. I'm not better at your technology. I'm just looking at it from a different standpoint. Okay? Frameworks help with that. And they're good things to use, even if you're using PCI. I make that sound depressing, but it's better than nothing. Now, 100% compliance is impossible. Just look at your patching policy. Is everybody up to date on patching? No. I had a certain black badge member here. I always forget what day STLSec was. And he goes, "It's Reboot Wednesday." I go, "What? Reboot Wednesday?" And he looked at me like I had three heads. And he goes, "You know, Patch Tuesday, Reboot Wednesday." I go, "You don't test your patches?" And he went, "Oh, sorry." You're always going to have something that doesn't meet the baseline. It's going to happen. These are gaps in your security, but they're inevitable. These are exceptions. Okay? I hated the word exception when I was a VP of IT. I hated exception as administrator. I love it now. And I'll tell you, from incident response, it's great. You know where your gaps are. This also allows you to keep track of them. And you can also maybe determine the duration. I had a certain power company, a city about the size of St. Louis in the West Coast. This was about 10 years ago. Ben and I were in New York, and I was running a test, and we would VPN. We'd take our internal system for on-site and then VPN to our test network, right? And I mean, number one, I did a port scan, and I crashed their power grid because they had VLC running on every system in multiple occasions, which was disturbing. But once they fixed that, I go, they kept using a hermetically sealed network. We have a hermetically sealed network. And I'm like, wow, it's almost like someone staged them, right? And I go, that's not possible. Yes, it is. I go, I'm in New York. My laptop is in your office or in your data center, and I'm connecting to it in St. Louis at our test facility. Well, that's an exception. Okay. I'm glad you brought that term up. Can you send me a list of all your exceptions? They lost track at like 200, okay? And it was emails flowing back and forth. It was a sieve. It was incredible. It's going to happen. Keep track of them. Don't hide your dirt. All right. Now, I had to put Milton up here because today I'm like, what is the worst company you could work for? And I think I got it. IoT Corp. Provides loans for medical procedures, operates in North America and Europe, publicly traded, the customer portal takes credit card payments. Okay, HIPAA, PCI, FFIEC, Sarbanes-Oxley, GRDP, and God knows what else. That's what their security group looks like. Okay? Be thankful for your security company or for your security job. Let's look at how they do policy. This is their data security policy. Again, I'll give this to people. I'm going to kind of read it. I try not to do a lot of words, but when you're talking about policy, having one word up there just doesn't work. You know, hashtag good. Read the entire policy. To ensure that all of IoTC Corp's data is handled with appropriate care, a data security program will be established. This data security program is responsible for ensuring the classification and handling of all data no matter the form. Policy done. We got one done. Should we just do everybody's policies in the next 10 minutes? I think we can do it. Identify owner. The policy owner, Chief Information Office, will be responsible for the establishment and guidance of the data security program. They're the ones that are accountable to the business unit. The InfoSec team will verify compliance to this policy through various methods, including two, but not limited to, business tool reports, internal and external audits, and feedback to the policy owner. Any exceptions to this policy must be approved by the InfoSec team in advance. Never happens. Non-compliance. An employee found to have violated this policy may be subject to disciplinary actions up to and including termination of employment. Policy done. Board can understand it. It's approved. This data security program will be relevant in 2019, 2029, 25, 25. It doesn't change. It's strategic planning. Easy. Now, when we start to get into the standards, that's where we start getting a lot more detailed. Now, we said that we're going to classify. I'm going to have a data classification standard. I actually copied and pasted parameters data security standard to explain how we do this. Well, the other standards that hold this up, encryption standard, backup standard, permission standards, you may have all these other standards, right? Now, to give you an idea, for example, of data classification, we talk about what classification is, and I will give this to anybody. And by the way, one of the biggest fights I have with PCI every year, we got delisted for 4 weeks because I would not go against this, is they go, why do you not have a copy of all of your clients' policies? Because that's a security risk. If I know your playbook, I know how to bypass. I can find weaknesses in your armor. I don't want to hold on to that. And I have a few clients out here that actually do vendor due diligence. And they can tell you. I go, you can see it, you're not getting it. I'm not going to do business with you if that's a requirement, and we've turned it down. Fortunately, a lot of those companies go, we get it. That's probably a good idea. They come on site, we have fun, we joke, we look at policy, we go eat. It's a good time, right? Don't give it away. We start talking about the differences between the data. So our first in parameter, our most secure information is called confidential client data. PHI, PII, CHD, audit information and forensic information. Confidential, whether oral, recorded in any form or any medium that is created by healthcare, is considered customer information by a bank, is considered PII or cardholder data. It all falls under that. And based on that, there are certain security things that we need to deal with. Sensitive client data. This may be your contracts with us, your NDAs, right? It's stuff that we still hold in a high regard, but it's not the highest regard. This is more about my business at this point, right? We don't say your name as a client unless you ask us to, or let us. And a lot of you do, which we thank. So, for example, we start to say stuff like, in our standard, it must be sent through encrypted means, only to authorized recipients. Then we start to get even further. Confidential information. This is our policies. This is our procedures. This is our workflow. This is stuff that we do as a company to ensure that we remain competitive. It's for parameter eyes only. For me to show you this, I had to get permission from our information officer, me. And I wrote and changed the policy to allow that. And then we start talking about internal information, finally public information. Now, a couple things here. You notice I'm not just dealing with PHI. I'm not just dealing with PII. We are information security professionals. We deal with all information. We classify all information. Even unclassified information is a classification. I did a class for the Department of State, and some dude's head almost blew when I made that statement. He's like, it's unclassified. I go, that's a classification. He goes, that's impossible. No, it's a classification. It was like, who's on first? 15 minutes. But we need to talk about how it works, because this is how the entire organization works with the information. And I've covered everything. Now, we talked about encryption standards, but we may have substandards in here. That doesn't the right word. It just keeps coming out. It's not substandard, but it's mini standards. It's substandards. Categories. There you go, Mike. File servers. For Linux, this is how we're going to do encryption on Linux servers. This is how we're going to do Windows. This is how we're going to deal with email. Okay? We start to go through to that area. Now, when we get down to our procedures then, for example, email encryption, we may have a procedure on generating the certificates, Outlook plugin installation, sending encrypted email. Those are 3 different groups that are following the same standard, right? We have our PKI group, we have our desktop group, and we have our end users. We better need to make sure that they're following the same standard. If you have it all in the same policy, it's a policy for IT and it's probably for your server. You're not hitting everything. This is the other reason why. I said we're information security, and if you notice, I put in there of any form. How do you handle PHI once it's printed? How do you handle cardholder data once it's printed? Once it's on a USB? Once it's left somewhere? Well, we say that we destroy it. Okay. Do you actually dictate what kind of lock it needs to be behind? Do you dictate what brand or what type of paper shredder you use? You're information security professionals. I mean, it's information. But we deal with computers because we're computer people. We can't do that. This is organizational wide as well. The standards for the accounting department and how they handle it will be different than yours, but they need to handle it too. So we need to make sure that we have these policies that stand alone. Now, one of the problems you will run into here is this gets confusing really quick. So, what we need is you need a GRC tool. Raise your hand if you have a GRC tool. Yeah, see, most people don't. You're still using paper. Okay, I'm running just a little bit behind here, of course. You start looking at GRC tools, and you're going to start a price tag about $100,000. Oh, your PCI? $50,000. We launched vCISO in one of our things last year, and it was for the smaller, mid-sized companies. To go in and say, okay, you're going to spend $100,000 to sort everything out is expensive. I'm a partner, just full disclosure, with Inabra, and they're actually open source, created by GRC professionals. But this holds your policies, this holds your standards, this lets you do data flow analysis. It will actually be company-wide, and it will actually allow the right people to have be able to create the right standards, policies, and it allows your security group to look it over. And it's cheap. Okay? The good tool is the one that does the job for you. And right now, none of you have a tool. You're using Microsoft Word. You're using Excel spreadsheet. I've actually got them in spreadsheet before. PowerPoint. Who knows? A wiki. This is going to be much better. Once you get through your basics of policy, the world opens up to you. You can do data flow analysis. That is, take a piece of data from creation to the endpoint and look at every single aspect where it touches and make sure that there is the appropriate policy and standard in place that meets the requirements of that data classification. It's easy. It's great. Enterprise-wide vendor due diligence. Right now, only your IT department's doing due diligence. A good GRC tool, and once you get this up, you've identified enterprise-wide vendors, and you can make sure they're all meeting it. PKI analysis. Are you actually meeting your goals? Historical tracking. Where have we historically had issues? Where have we been good? Where do we need to focus our attention to? And where, in the future, where can we anticipate problems? You should budget for failures, because it's going to happen. Now, final thoughts here. Again, policies is nothing more than documentation of how you do your business. None are the same, and they should support your business. Avoid legalese. You don't work with a bunch of lawyers. One of my web testers is still a lawyer, and he hates legalese, okay? You want it to be clear and concise for everyone. Just plain words, and don't make it a book. The thud factor is not impressive when it comes to policy. Business units are responsible for the creation, the funding, the enforcement, and the oversight of these policies. Subject matter experts write the procedures. One final story here. I had a client. They were showing me their procedures and their standards. Every year, they did firewall checks, firewall rule checks monthly. That's what their policy person said. And I said, okay. So I went to their network administrator and said, how often do you check firewall rules? Quarterly. Oh, can you do it monthly? No, that's insane. The policy says so. They don't know what we're talking about. There's a problem, right? They fixed that. And finally, document. This right here is awesome, but if it's in here, no one else can follow it. And if this goes away, so does everything else. I don't have any time for any questions, but thank you